I'm just going to start off with that introduction. It's a fairly big introduction that you've given me, Dia, that I will need to live up to. I'm going to spend 5 minutes just talking about why we call this India century. A lot of people have called it India's decade. We do believe it's India's century. Before diving into some of the themes that we've heard today, but also some of the themes we think that are going to play out over the next 10 years. But before we go into why healthcare is exciting and why this theme is going to play out, I think the first and most underwritten topic that we need to talk about is India's macro. India's macro, the 5 topics to talk about. First is the fact that we are demonstrating outperformance like we never have in our history. Across emerging markets, but across any large market of scale, our growth on GDP has been a success story. We've heard about it, but GDP growth is underwritten. Our foreign direct investment is at an all-time high. Our tax to GDP ratio is moving in the right direction. And our currency, while we benchmark ourselves to the dollar and see the overall pain that we've felt, has actually appreciated quite significantly over the last 12 months versus the yen, versus the euro, versus the GBP. So there is a very fundamental, strong economic platform that we're working off. But underlying that platform is the story of urbanization. We're going to see over 200 million incremental urban residents by 2030, which is very significant, and it's going to be one of the largest urbanization events that's going to happen globally. And compared to 2011, there's going to be a shift of over 200 million people. There's a 66% shift into urban households, which also means the kind of jobs that are going to get created are away from farm jobs, going to be more urbanization, infrastructure-oriented spend. There is an entire shift that's underwriting this macro story for India. The third one is something that we've spoken about before in many fora, but is the fact that there's going to be a 3x growth in the consuming class. We heard Prem speak about this earlier on today, imply what the macro indicators are. But as you look at it, we're going to triple in terms of the number of consuming class households that we're going to have in India. The implication is once households hit consuming class, health and education are the 2 segments that are going to get the most spend within the overall wallet. The fourth is an exponential impact of technology. We've seen what technology can do. I think several of our speakers today implied on what that means for healthcare. But just as you underline what's driven that, there is a digital in India story. It's been driven by the cut in cost. We're among the cost leaders in how data is accessed. That cost has tumbled, leading to one of the largest digital identity programs that's been driven by our government. There are government marketplaces, the payment infrastructure, e-retail, the number of online job seekers is among the highest in the world, the number of smartphones, larger than most countries, number of independent internet users, but also the number of social media profiles. So if you look at that ecosystem, it's actually something that becomes platformic and drives an exponential growth. The Uber would have never been possible without Google Maps. Google Maps would not have been possible without smartphones. So the platform only creates greater solutions and tools, and it's up to us to imagine what this technology platform is going to allow us 10 years out. It's going to be almost impossible to imagine. The last one is we have had a favorable policy environment to actually enable a lot of this opportunity, whether that's UPI or Make in India, the National Digital Health Mission, Skill India, to name a few, but across agriculture, across retail, across healthcare, there have been several policies that have also enabled this macroeconomic environment. With that background, I want to talk about a few strengths and trends that we spoke about today that we believe will continue to endure. The first is the fact that we're the generics pharmacy of the world. We are an unbelievably dominant force in India. Our Indian pharma manufacturers continue to own most of the pie. We heard some of the stories today. But as you think about emerging markets, North America, a re-embracement of Europe, we will continue to be the pharmacy of the world. Something like 30% of the drugs that are consumed globally are going to have an India angle to them, whether that's API intermediaries or the formulation itself. And that just makes us the center of gravity for drugs that we think will endure over the next decade as well. The second theme that we think will continue to endure is CDMO. there is a macro trend in terms of the number of companies that are going to outsource some part of the overall value chain, whether that's to development or contract manufacturing or analytical services. We believe it's anywhere in the range of 180 to $200 billion that's actually getting outsourced every year, and that trend's going to grow. But as you think about the capabilities that Indian manufacturers are able to build and Indian development organizations are able to build, we are going to be able to take a larger portion of that pie. And with the rise of biotechs in the US, more and more people focusing on core R&D and commercial function, there's going to be a lot more that you'd want to outsource and offshore to manufacturers and development organizations in India. So we see that theme continuing to play out. CDMOs in India are typically subscale compared to some of their global peers, but we will catch up and in style over the next 10 years. The third one, and we've been talking about how small molecule is moving to large molecule in treatment pathways, and those large molecules are going to go off patent. And when they go off patent, they become biosimilars. And the story of biosimilars is finally here. We have scale in India already. But if you look at who is the dominant force in emerging markets of who makes biosimilars, it again, all roads point back to India. And you see some of the early launches around trastuzumab, pegfilgrastim in the US. You also see a very strong India leg playing out in developed markets. So the story of biosimilars is finally here. And if that's the future of medicine, then we have a leg firmly implanted over there. I'm not going to talk about the fourth theme that we think is going to endure. We just had a panel where I thought they did a job that I cannot match. But the ownership of their health journeys, the ownership of wellness, whether it's nutrition, whether it's diet, whether it's immersive research, as Nandini was speaking about, or the use of technology to really get to the next level of owning their own journey in health is the first step to consumerization. But also, I think the Indian consumer health brands have just become more able on brand building. And that's the second theme under consumerization that you're going to see them scale and stand up to global consumer health companies. The third leg of consumerization is services. And I think we're going to be a world leader in the kind of services that we're going to offer our consumers here in India on consumerization. You've already seen the kind of doorstep services that we get on diagnostics. That's only the beginning. Now, when you merge that with wearable technology that's there in India and you merge that with several other things, I think you will see consumerization in services really be a very strong theme. The last one, and I think it's useful to spend a minute on, is innovation in the provider sector. Again, you heard about it earlier today very eloquently in a way that I can't match. But whether it's business models, which I think we spent a lot of time on, but more importantly, scale and reach, driven both by insurance, but also government infrastructure coming into play, but also private equity and VC money enabling innovative models. I think that's going to scale to enable a lot more patients in India access high quality healthcare. So those are the 4 or 5 themes of India currently in its healthcare ecosystem that we think will continue to play out over the next decade. But what are the new themes that are going to come out of this? It's an interesting question to say, what are the emerging themes that are going to broad base what India has stood for over the last 10 years, last 20 years? What are those themes that are going to play out over the next 10 years? First is, I do think medical devices is going to be the next pharma generic story. I think a combination of favorable policy, a combination of private equity and VC money, and I think participation of players who are in non-healthcare, expanding their capabilities into healthcare. You put all those 3 things together, and you'll see the medical device space really take off and become strong and entrenched for India. The second one is cell and gene therapy. I don't think we're going to be cell and gene therapy leaders for the world, but I think there is India for India in innovation like what Immunil is doing that is going to introduce new technologies to treat cancers using cell and gene therapy with an India costing and pricing that will make it affordable for us to use. And I think that's an innovation that we will see in India that's going to stand us in very good stead. The third one is a macro theme around senior care. India is going to age. India is going to age like never before. We're going to have a relatively young population still, but that's only relative to the size of the market. There is going to be a very large senior care population. I think the standardization of care, the overcoming of the stigma of people moving out of their ancestral homes to care homes, but also have home care delivered, is going to actually explode. And we believe that over the next 10 years, senior care is going to come of age through technology, through consumerization, but also at home through products and devices that are going to be accessible for our seniors. The fourth theme is actually tech-enabled holistic health. You're going to have wearables that are going to expand. But India has been one of the leaders in incubating disease-specific chronic care that is encompassing a wearable, a nutritional package, counseling services, put all of that together, address a need state. And you'll see us leading the world in what we're able to do and bring holistic and multidimensional care to each of our therapies. The fifth one, and this has been a bit of a hidden theme over the last 5 years, but we see it playing out. We heard on Indegene a little while earlier today, but we actually believe we're going to become the factory of the world for healthcare support services, whether that's analytics, whether that's new age software solutions, whether that's digitizing solutions across the entire value chain. We actually think we are going to be an epicenter for analytical solutions and software in healthcare. That's going to be a theme to back and incubate out of India. Are we going to get critical mass in novel and biotech? I don't know. We will not compare with the 16,000 assets that are between phase 1 and phase 3 currently globally. So we're not going to be a very large portion of that. But will we begin to have our own story and our own narrative and begin to have therapeutics that are going to be globally acknowledged? I think the next 10 years will definitely see that being underlined. Is it going to be a story of scale and very large significance? Probably not. But is it going to be similar to the 60s and 70s of the pharma industry in India? I think this will become the beginning. The last one is, how is health coverage going to play out? Is it going to become universal? Is universal health coverage going to become truly universal? I think combination of tech-powered insurance, interoperability of data, but also customization of care to address some of the policies around Ayushman Bharat, etc., will really unlock health coverage for India. So we will see a customization, an India-specific insurance story that we haven't seen play out anywhere else in the world. And it's going to be similar to the payment story, similar to what we've seen in other industries. We're going to see this play out in India as an India-first insurance story that's going to be very specific for the patients in the country. Lastly, we have several of you on this call who are going to be movers and shakers in how this story is going to play out. So this is really an ask from all of us to participate in this story with the right spirit. And I'm going to underline 5 themes on that. The first is, let's dwell on India's potential and not roadblocks. That's what you've done. We would not have an Indegene, we would not have a Pristine, we would not have a Piramal, we would not have a PharmEasy if it's not for the entrepreneurs and the leaders who've been able to see through the many complexities that India has, but really arrive at the solutions. And I'd only urge all of us to continue to take that solution mindset, because that's what's going to create the next generation of these entrepreneurs and solutions out of India. So the first is, how do we continue to dwell on the opportunities that this 1.3 billion population market will offer us? The second thing is, I think in India, we're always going to be held to a higher standard and to a discount on what we can really do that is going to be of the highest quality. So we can't afford to slip up on quality. We can't afford to slip up on 483s or warning letters on the pharmaceutical manufacturing side of things. But we also need to hold ourselves to the highest standard on quality of services, only because we're going to be challenged a lot more than some of our Western counterparts coming out of India. So to be able to hold ourselves to the highest standard of quality, even when no one is looking, and to a standard that we define and potentially is higher than what is there globally, is the only way we will be able to break out of the mold that we're an emerging market, potentially lower quality infrastructure outcome. So the second urge that I'd urge all of us to embrace is to really set ourselves to the highest quality standards across each of the products and services that we launch. The third one, linked to point 2, is the narrative. I think oftentimes the narrative on India takes on to the myriad of problems that we have, the difficulties that we face, but we all have an obligation, not a right, but an obligation to tell the story of innovation that we're all on in India. because so many of the solutions that we've solved in India are actually going to help solve global problems. And I really think we have an obligation to tell that story repeatedly, and with all the passion that we have, to arrive at the India innovation story. Remind people, but also help people get the most out of the India story on innovation and access. Fourth is we're not going to be able to do this on our own. So let's not be ashamed of partnering with people. Let's not be ashamed of bringing those innovations back to India. There's a lot that we can learn from looking east to Southeast Asia, to China, to Japan. There's a lot that we can learn from the US and the Western world. There's a lot that we can learn from Israel's ecosystem. But let's keep our ears, doors, windows open to learn from that innovation and bring it all back to India. The last one is we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of giants who've made this industry happen. And I think we all have an obligation to foster an ecosystem that can support the next generation of these giants. We need to know that our role is not just to continue to sustain the journey that's all there, but like we spoke about in the previous slide, there are 8, 9, 10 themes that are going to emerge from the next 10 years. And several of them we don't even know at this point because they haven't been imagined as yet. And the only way those will get imagined is as brave new entrepreneurs emerging out of colleges with no encumbrances that we were subject to imagine this brave new world. And we have a obligation again and a role to play in making sure that we mentor, sponsor, support this entire generation of people who are going to shape healthcare coming out of India, but for the world as well. With that last message, I just wanted to infuse you with a sense of passion, energy for what we stand on in this market, but also a duty and obligation to make sure that we shine as much for the next decade, but also for the next century. This is India's century, not just India's decade, and we need to make sure that comes through with all the support that we can. Thank you.